Okay, I need to preface this. Tears of the Kingdom is a great game, but to me it has a few deep flaws to it, and I'm around the halfway point, I believe? And I've done the Wind Temple, the Lightning Temple, as well as the Mineru quest line, and I'm going to spoil that stuff, okay? Understand? Good. Well, let's talk about one of Zelda's most hyped up entries of all time. Okay, right off the bat, what didn't I like about Breath of the Wild that I wanted to see changed in Tears of the Kingdom? Well, number one is dungeon design. I didn't mind them when I first played Breath back on release, but nowadays they are kind of lackluster to me. Well, very lackluster, as well as the boss design. Now with Tears, what did they do? Well, Wind Temple was a massive disappointment for me. Just kind of felt like more the Breath of the Wild design, where you just get some rooms and flip 4 switches, job done. And then the boss fight was a borderline joke in my opinion. Yeah, there's something to be said about it probably being intended to be your first boss. At the same time, you can do these dungeons in any order, and imagine that giant centipede form being one of your last bosses in the game, where it just floats around the sky for a little bit and you have to shoot it 6 times. At least some of the Blight Ganon forms from Breath had some interesting mechanics going on with them, but I will admit the environment was really cool. Fighting a boss in midair, riding the currents, while annoying as hell when you wanted to turn around on a dime, it was overall a really cool feel, and it added to the experience to at least make it memorable. And then the Lightning Temple, right? I think it's way better than the Wind one. It's not my favorite Zelda dungeon ever, but probably my favorite one so far of the Breath and Tears era. Yeah, it was kind of just flip 4 switches and boss fight again, but at least it was dressed up this time in some cool temple exploration, Tomb Raider, Indiana Jones-esque adventure dungeon where you're maneuvering light beams around. Kind of felt like Wind Waker in that regard. It was just overall a pleasant experience to me. The boss was a step up from the icy human Sentai pad, but whereas the Wind Temple boss had fighting for the air to make it memorable, there wasn't really anything for the lightning boss to do the same for me. But I digress. Riju's lightning ability is really cool. Yeah, the lightning ability in Breath of the Wild was also really fun, but I like the idea that I can aim it here in regards to where I shoot my arrow. My one complaint is the fact I have to run up to Riju, which, depending upon how many monsters you're fighting, can be quite annoying to do. Run up to her, then get close enough, and then hit the button, and then wait for the AoE to go out, and then I can use the lightning ability. I wish this was just button mapped, but despite all that, the lightning ability itself is still really cool, and the fight itself was decent enough. But for me, the real star of the show has been everything that doesn't have to do with traditional Zelda elements. Exploring the open world is really cool. And you can even argue that is a traditional Zelda element from the very first game on the NES. I love zipping up fallen sky debris using reverse, and then floating down to the mountain I want to scale below, or to scout out for shrines or monster encampments. Ascend is freaking god tier, and is going to harm other open world games that I play, because I'm just going to wish that I had Ascend. It makes navigation just overall more enjoyable, because it removes a massive annoyance for me. Unnecessary time wasters, like exiting caves or scaling mountains very slowly, or even sometimes awkwardly. If there's something that I can use to ascend, like in a cave the ceiling, then job done. It's great and can be used in monster encampments as well as to scale up their towers for better positioning or to evade strong enemies or to get up high enough to jump off and then slow-mo arrow some jabronis. Fuse somewhat alleviates the weapon durability system, or at least the flaws that I have with it, or issues that I have with it. Now, I think there is some benefit to having weapon durability. I'm not completely against the system. It can encourage exploration and varying your playstyle based on what you have and utilizing the world to feed your progression constantly, while always incentivizing the world. With Fuse, that's doubly so, since you can take very basic items like sticks, or basic weapons like basic broadswords, or swords, or longswords, or whatever, and you can then make them infinitely better if you have those right drops in your inventory that you have been saving from your various kills. Say you take a basic sword and attach a Gleeok horn or something to it. All of a sudden, you got a flame blade that tears through enemies. Or maybe you attach a black bokoblin boss horn to a stick, and all of a sudden, you not only have an axe that you can use to cut down trees easily with, but you also have a strong weapon at that. You can pocket resources like that so that you can create strong weapons out of seemingly nothing or thin air, so long as you aren't too wasteful and manage your resources. I think durability can still get annoying, but Fuse is a great mechanic to expand on the system's inherent strengths. And I mean, do I need to say anything about Ultrahand that hasn't already been said? It's freaking brilliant. The creativity that it allows you, that the game Tears of the Kingdom just allows you to have, is undeniable. And the fact that I can look at a mountain, just a mountain, and remember this applies to everything in the game, and I can come up with numerous different ways to climb said mountain, speaks to the strengths of the Breath and Tears formula. My only complaint is that I wish snapping was a little bit easier, or better. Sometimes it snaps to places that I don't want the item to fuse to, or I spend like 10 minutes trying to line up wheels so I don't inevitably end up doing donuts like an idiot. There's a bit of a workaround here with auto build, so you only need to make a generic vehicle once, and then you can just auto build it. But sometimes I use different bases for my vehicles, sometimes sleds or carts or gliders or sheets of wood. Snapping is a good thing to have, I just wish it was a little bit more customizable for how much it snapped or to where. I imagine the code may be the reason for this, and maybe it would get a little bit wonky if I could snap it anywhere. Like, I imagine the reason the snapping works the way it does is for some back-end reason, but I don't know, I'm not an expert enough in that regard. It's still a really great system, it just royally pisses me off sometimes when I'm spending so many minutes just trying to line crap up, or end up fusing the wheel itself and not the axle or whatever to the cart, and then the wheel just doesn't turn. I feel like a possible solution to this could be being able to fuse things in midair. Like, say Link had two hands to use Ultra Hand with. One hand throws something in midair, and I use the other hand to fuse stuff to that object in midair. That would probably alleviate most of my issues, but for me, I think the strength of Tears of the Kingdom doesn't lie in any of that, nor the combat, because I'm kind of here or there on the Breath and Tears combat by itself. I don't really have any strong feelings one way or the other, and I don't think it's the story, we'll get to that. I think the strength of Tears of the Kingdom is the adventure, and that to me is the core of a Zelda game. Let me paint you a scene. I decided to explore some sky islands, so I do my thing. I get up there, a little bit rainy, a little bit misty, it's hard to see. Okay, so I start to explore a little bit. I find a structure, and I go inside that structure so that I have a little bit more visibility to see what lies below. And I find a unique temple-ish building inside, where I find a mask. The mask lights up and shoots a beam of light down to the surface towards the building. So, I decide, you know what, let's follow this. I devise a glider build to carry myself and the mask down to the surface level. I bring the mask inside, and then I embark on a quest line, after the mask begins to speak to me, down into the depths. I slot the mask into a pedestal, and then I have to solve 4 little puzzle rooms to gain other robotic limbs, to construct a freaking mech! And if you know anything about me, you know I think that is just the epitome of coolness. Because afterwards, I then get to pilot said mech. I can equip its various limbs with different objects that I find in the world. I can attach a rocket to its back to get a jump. Sure, I have to kind of disembark whenever I come across a bokoblin camp, because this thing has a hitbox the size of a small island, but it still fights alongside me, with the items that I gave it. It's still a really cool idea in a system, and a mechanic. But then I finally reach my destination, another temple-ish building, and I go inside. I walk up, and all of a sudden I'm enclosed. A fence begins to form around me. And then, BattleBots! Just a boss fight where I use my mech to fight another mech. It's easy, it's not that difficult of a fight, but it's still really freaking cool, and varies up the game pace, the game flow. Gives me different mechanics to work around with. It's refreshing. And then afterwards, I'm rewarded by learning about an important story event for what happened to Zelda. Like, yeah, that's the Mineru questline, or Mineru, I forget how you pronounce it. A questline that I think the game forces you to do later on, but I just found it naturally, and decided of my own agency to embark on this grand little adventure. That is the strength of Tears of the Kingdom. The fact that that can happen anytime I turn a corner. anytime I want to just go explore something new, I may find something just like that. That rewards exploration, that makes my playthrough and the way that I tackle Hyrule feel unique and special and individualized to me. The world goes at my own pace, not the other way around. Now, I would personally like a more linear Zelda story, but there is an undeniable strength to being able to just naturally uncover these grand quest lines that fill in various blanks for you, just out of nowhere, because I decided of my own free will and had no push or nudge from the game to just explore a random sky island, and then all of a sudden I'm greeted with an hours-long quest line filled with different gameplay elements, puzzles that in my opinion kind of range in quality, but also encourages exploration and utilizes the mechanics of the game to its advantage. It's great! That's a phenomenal way to go about this open world. Having said that, God, do I wish the story was more than just flashbacks again. It had some undeniable strengths very early on for me, because the story was actually happening in the modern day, but I'm gonna talk about the story more when I beat the game, when I do all the memories, when I do all the story important stuff, right? I'll talk about it then, but to me, it feels like Tears of the Kingdom is taking so many risks when it comes to the formula. It comes to every other aspect of Zelda and of this game. It takes so many risks. And in my opinion, most of them, if not all, pay off. It's a phenomenal game. I don't know why the story is seemingly the one place they don't want to take risks in. Or at least up to this point, because I'm a decent chunk into the game. That's how it feels. Where all the other elements of the game are taking risks, trying new things, and they're working. But they're falling back on the Breath of the Wild style of story, where it's heavily leaning on flashbacks and characters you don't really interact with all that much, outside of one storyline or like one cutscene, where they say, hey, thanks for helping out the new sage, you're doing a good job. By the way, here's a flashback. It makes me wish that the game was set back then, or at least had sections where I played as Zelda back then. How cool would that be? You beat a dungeon, you get a new sage, power as well, and then you're greeted with a little flashback scenario where you play as Zelda during these events to break up the game flow. Maybe the gameplay is a little bit different with Zelda, so it breaks that up and keeps you on your toes and keeps you engaged. I like that kind of stuff. Maybe it introduces a unique mechanic that may not work for the overworld overall, but in this closed-off, instanced area with Zelda, it can work. I think that would have been really cool, they just don't do it. But I'm gonna talk more about the story when I actually beat the game. So, right now, the game is still 2 thumbs up for me. Sure, it has its faults, I don't think it's a perfect game, but it's a dang good one. Great one, even. Dang, 2023 is just such a goated year for games, honestly. So many good games. So, I'm gonna call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in, my pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games if you can, and as always, I'll see you all next time. Hit the bell icon to be notified for when I upload and stream in the future. Bye bye, everybody, until we meet again.